It is now my pleasure to introduce today's speaker. Dee Ann Turner has worked for Chick-fil-A for more than 30 years and currently serves as Vice President, Corporate Talent. Dee Ann was the first female officer in the Chick-fil-A Corporation. Over the years, she has played an intricate role in growing Chick-fil-A and their unique and highly regarded culture while overseeing recruitment, selection, and retention of corporate staff and the recruitment and selection of Chick-fil-A franchisees. Dee Ann's insightful knowledge and applicable tools to building an incredible and influential company culture are revealed in her recently released book, It's My Pleasure: The Impact of Extraordinary Talent and a Compelling Culture. Dee Ann attended Cincinnati Christian University in Cincinnati, Ohio, majoring in journalism and Christian education. She later completed her education at Clayton State University in Atlanta with a degree in management. She received further certifications at Goizueta School of Business at Emory University, Darden School of Business at the University of Virginia, Keenan Flagler Business School at UNC Chapel Hill, and she completed the prestigious Advanced Management program at Harvard Business School. Dee Ann serves as a board member for the Kenya Project, an organization that provides education, homes, food, and spiritual growth for children in Proverbs 31 ministry in Charlotte, North Carolina. Dee Ann and her husband, Ashley, have been married for over 30 years, and they have 3 sons, Trenton, Trevor, and Trey. Ladies and gentlemen, it is an honor to present to you Miss Dee Ann Turner.
Thank you very much. Appreciate that. Thank you. Well, good morning. It is really hard to follow a true American hero. But I have to tell you, it's such an honor and very much a privilege to be with you all today. And before I go any further, I just want to take a moment to say thank you. I get to do what I do because so many of you who either graduate from here or will go serve, do what you do and provide that opportunity for me to do that in these great United States. And so sincerely, from the very bottom of my heart, I thank you for your service and for what you do. I was driving in last night, and the wonderful escorts that met me and my son Trey, who's with me today, as we were driving in and I saw him, I said, I have to tell you, I'm really intimidated. I said, you know, here I'm coming to a place where you're responsible for helping protect 300 million U.S. citizens here and 10 million citizens abroad, and I'm in the chicken business. So I was just a little intimidated by that idea, but the more I thought about it, there really is something that we have in common. As my former boss, Truett Cathy, used to like to say, he said, we're not in the chicken business, we're in the people business. And you know, we're all in the people business, whatever we do, whether we're defending lives or we're marketing a product or service, running a company, whatever it is, we're all in the people business. And at the core of the people business is how we develop our culture. And that's what I want to share with you today, is some thoughts about the essence of a compelling culture. 30 years ago, I was at the same place that a lot of the people in this room are in. I was about the same age. I wasn't in the same place because I wasn't here. I had graduated from college, and I went to work for Truett Cathy, the founder of Chick-fil-A. And for 29 years before his death in 2014, I had the honor of working directly with him all those years. And he taught me everything that I know, basically, about leading people, about selecting talent, and about strengthening and growing a compelling culture. He used to like to say, Dee Ann, don't forget, people decisions are the most important decisions we make. We're going to talk about a little bit as we unpack this idea of a compelling culture. You know, it's certainly easier to create a compelling culture, as Truett did from the beginning, rather than to have to recreate one or fix one, a broken one. But as Lou Gerstner proved at IBM, it is possible. So whether you're in the stages of maybe you're a young cadet that's thinking about how you might lead you're already leading, or you're going to lead upon graduation, or you're in the business world, or you're leading in the service right now, to think about how you can create a compelling culture in that group that you lead. You know, the essence of culture is about relationships with either who we serve or who we serve with. And culture is really about the story that those relationships tell. You know, at Chick-fil-A, we call it living life together. Culture can be a very elusive term, but we call it living life together. And you know, this is where it kind of reminds me of military service, because many of you, some of you, will serve an entire career in the military. And we have done that at Chick-fil-A. We have people who serve 20, 30, and 40 years with our organization, both as corporate staff and as franchisees. And so we go to each other's weddings and their children by the time you work that long. And we go to funerals together, and we do baby showers together and graduations. And yes, we've even watched some of our fellow friends send their kids off to serve our country. So when you think about how do you create a compelling culture, it starts with 4 key elements. And the first is, we say, why are we in business? What is your purpose for existing? You know, Truett Cathy, the interesting story about Chick-fil-A, and I hear there are a lot of Chick-fil-A fans at the Air Force Academy, is that right? Thank you. That was the most comforting thing that I found out last night. They said, it's okay, because there are a lot of fans here. So, Truett Cathy, when he started Chick-fil-A, he had not created the well-defined culture that we have. In fact, it's kind of an interesting story I want to tell you. Back in 1983, which is long before most of you are around, Truett had been in business since 1946 when he opened his first restaurant. And in 1967, he opened actually the first Chick-fil-A. And in 1983 was the first time ever that Chick-fil-A had a sales slump. And that same year, he had moved into a beautiful new corporate campus. And that meant he was heavily in debt. And since he was the guy that owned it all, he was heavily in debt. And we had this sales slump, and he didn't quite know what to do about it. So he took all of his leaders off on a retreat. Now, when that happens, sometimes people come back and they have a cost reduction plan, or they have a new sales contest of how you can grow sales among the restaurants, or they have a reduction in force plan. But Truett didn't come back with any of that. Actually, his team came back with an idea about why we were in business at all. And so they came up with 2 ideas. One is, we were in business to be a steward of all that had been entrusted to us. All the resources, the talent, the treasure, the time, all of those things. And secondly, to be a positive influence on all with whom we come in contact. And so after this, the staff gave Truett a gift. They engraved this in stone and put it out in the front of our corporate headquarters. And the idea is that every time somebody came through, they would remember exactly why we're in business. Because you see, we may have been in the chicken business, but we were really in the people business. And chicken was simply a means to do what? Well, to impact lives. And so what were the results? So this looked like this. And I made some comparisons on my slides for you guys, because I loved what some of your vision and mission and core values were as I went through as part of the Air Force. But the results of carving this in stone, Chick-fil-A's never had a slump in sales since that year. In fact, most years we have double-digit sales increases. 2015 was the best year for Chick-fil-A ever. We reached $6.8 billion in sales. We have a franchisee retention rate of over 95%. And we have a corporate staff retention rate of over 96%. This is over a course of 30 years. Our Chick-fil-A restaurant operators, they've done an amazing job. They lead the industry in retention of hourly team members. And in 2012, Chick-fil-A became a debt-free organization. So it made a difference when we knew exactly why we were in business. Well, once you know why, the secondly is, what are we in business to do? So to do that, you want to articulate a challenging mission. And at Chick-fil-A, what we determined is that mission is to be remarkable. Now, we've had different missions, because once you achieve a mission, then you can develop a new mission. And so our first mission prior to Be Remarkable was to satisfy be America's best quick service restaurant at satisfying every guest. So we achieved that. We actually became America's best, and when we did, well, we had to have something bigger than that. So we decided that our mission was to be remarkable. Well, what does that mean? Well, you all cheered, so I think that you're having some remarkable experiences. You're having remarkable food, and I hope that you're having remarkable service from the people that serve you. And that's exactly what we intended to do. And once you've achieved this mission, then there's the opportunity to have a strategy and determine what the core values are. I love the core values of Chick-fil-A, and I love how they're demonstrated. Chick-fil-A core values, and I love this best because this is where I saw so much connection between the Air Force and Chick-fil-A. So core values are this: excellence. This has been demonstrated so many different ways. For one thing, if we had a president, Jimmy Collins. Jimmy retired in 2001, and he liked to say, if you're not serving chicken, you better be serving someone who is. And so Jimmy really demonstrated excellence in our organization. He would do things, and I saw a cadet I was with today. He did that. He walked along, and there was a piece of trash, and he stepped down and picked it up. And if you go to our restaurants and you're walking around with a Chick-fil-A operator or a team member in the parking lot, you're likely to see them do the same thing, because that's demonstrating excellence in what you see. And if we're demonstrating excellence in what you see, then hopefully we're demonstrating excellence in what you don't see in the back of the house. Jimmy was just a penchant for details, and so we renamed gym clips or paper clips in our organization are called Jimmy clips, because Jimmy didn't let any of them remain on the floor. In fact, when I was a young employee at Chick-fil-A, I very naively mentioned to Jimmy that I saw a paper clip on the top of the elevator in our 5-story atrium. So it's a glass elevator, and I could see it on top. Our building manager was not very happy with me, because he was the one who had to climb up there and get that paper clip off. There were no paper holes on the floor anywhere. He was a perfectionist about that. But perhaps the thing that I appreciated most about Jimmy Collins was something that he demonstrated in humility. We had an exit ramp that leads to our corporate office, and that exit ramp often has trash on it. Now, sometimes, not from our people, but other people, it might even be Chick-fil-A trash, and Truett called that free advertising. But Jimmy wanted you to have a great experience from the time that you exited the exit ramp to go to the corporate office until you arrived there. And so that trash certainly didn't create a remarkable experience. Much like as I drove through the campus today and last night, and everything is pristine here at the Air Force Academy, that's the way it is at our campus. And Jimmy was the one who demonstrated that the most. And so every morning he would get out and he would stop on that exit ramp and he would pick up all the trash and put it in his car. Now, when he retired, he was the president of a $1 billion company. And he got out and picked up the trash and put it in his car. Well, after a while, our grounds maintenance staff decided that that might be a little dangerous for the 65-year-old president of a $1 billion company to be out picking up trash on the ramp, and so they started picking it up. Jimmy's been retired 15 years, and he most recently, he most recently published a book, by the way, called Creative Followership. If you want a good read, I'm recommending that to all of you cadets. It's written for just where you are in life, called Creative Followership. But Jimmy's pattern of behavior has been followed all those years since he left, and we still get the trash off the rampway. Our second core value of integrity, I don't think there's a better example of how that was demonstrated than by Truett himself when he decided to close restaurants on Sunday. So the story behind that is that Truett, in 1946, started his first restaurant in Hapeville, Georgia. It was a 24-hour restaurant, and so when he got to the first Saturday night, I think he decided it was a good idea to be closed on Sunday. He was tired, and his employees were tired, and so he closed the restaurant, and they took a day off. In fact, Truett said, if you can't make a living in 6 days, then perhaps you should do something else. I don't guess that applies to you all because we need protection 7 days a week here in the United States. But so I appreciate the fact you work 7 days a week. But he did have that value about taking time off. Later, of course, and by the way, you know, in 1946, that wasn't such a big deal to be closed on Sunday. I wasn't around then, and not many people in this room probably were, but most businesses were closed in 1946. Where it became an issue was in 1967 when he opened that first mall restaurant. And the landlords weren't very happy that he wanted to be closed on Sunday because by then, especially in the malls, everything was open. That was their biggest day of the week. And so Truett negotiated in some prime locations he didn't get to go into because he was closed on Sunday. That was a real mark of his integrity. Now, eventually what the landlords learned is that Chick-fil-A did as much business in 6 days a week as the others did in 7. So the landlords become much more friendly about that. And then later, of course, as we opened freestanding locations, that became not as important to the landlords, but always to us. So I think that that was one of the greatest ways that Truett showed his integrity. Loyalty was demonstrated by Truett as well. In a day and age when people primarily don't stay very long in organizations, and some of these cadets, after you get out of the service, you're probably thinking, wow, 20, 30, 40 years somewhere, that's just not part of your generation right now, right? You're not thinking that way. We're lucky if we can keep people 5 years. But Truett really felt like people will be as loyal to you as you are to them, and he demonstrated a lot of loyalty. Now, in the early days, I don't often tell this story, but I know you all turned off your cell phones. I'm going to tell you this funny story about Truett Cathy. He used to, when you brought a candidate in, whether it was a franchisee or a corporate staff member, he would bring that person in, and he interviewed, by the way, he interviewed all of those people in their final interview. And oftentimes I would sit in on those interviews, and he'd look at me, and he'd look at the candidate, and he'd say, okay, I hope you really like each other, and you're sure of what you're doing here, because you're stuck with each other till one of you dies or retires. Now, if there are any HR people in here, you know that kind of borders on an implied contract, so I tried to sway Truett to quit saying that as much as often. But that's really what he believed, that was what was intended. And so once you made a selection with Truett, if you decided it wasn't a very good selection, you also had to go talk to him about that because he made all those decisions. You see, people are the most important decisions you make. So as the leader, he was very involved in people decisions. So when you went to see Truett about making a change, he would say, well, so what have you done about that? Well, Truett, we did this and this and this. He said, try harder. And he'd send you back for more coaching and more development. And generally, if you had a real performance problem, it'd take about 3 or 4 meetings with Truett before he'd say, okay. And so we don't have very many terminations at Chick-fil-A because we spend a lot of time on the front end of our selection process. We're very careful about who we go into business with. Chick-fil-A gets 30,000 inquiries for franchisees a year. Now, I want to tell you some really good news. We have a lot of retired Air Force officers that are Chick-fil-A operators. In fact, we have more Air Force officers than any other branch of the service, so there's something going on with the Air Force that's preparing good leaders for Chick-fil-A. And in my second session today, I'm going to tell you a story about one of those, so I'm looking forward to that. But 30,000 applications a year for 100 opportunities. Out of those 100 opportunities, 2/3 are going to go to people who are already associated with Chick-fil-A. So you are very smart people, and you just did that math, that it's about impossible. But we spend all that time on the front end making sure that we make the best decision so that we don't have to spend the time and money on the back end making a change. And so that's the opposite of what most organizations do. They're a little bit quicker to take a chance and make a decision, and they don't focus and spend as much time on this. But then on the back end, they have to spend more time. My favorite example of Truett's loyalty is that when he opened the Dwarf House in 1946 there in Hapeville, Georgia, he had some customers that ate with him 3 times a day. He believed they didn't just come for a 15-cent cup of coffee. That's what it cost them. That was long before Starbucks. He believed that they came because they were known. back to that whole idea of culture is about the relationships and the stories that those relationships tell. In fact, you know, every person doesn't just have a story, they are a story. And Truett really invested in those relationships. So they would come and eat with him 3 times a day. Well, very interesting who these people were. First of all, they were employees of the Ford plant that was located just down the street from him. Of course, they worked 24 hours a day. They had 3 shifts. The other employees were from Delta Airlines, and they too worked 3 shifts a day. So he had people in there all the time. So when Truett became successful, he didn't forget those people. Interesting story. So Delta Airlines has always chartered Chick-fil-A flights for all of our annual conventions, and most of all of our business for our travel for our organization goes through Delta. Now you're probably thinking, well, of course, what else is there in Atlanta? Well, this was even before. This was when there used to be other airlines there to compete with Delta. The other group was the Ford employees. So what did Truett do? Well, he drove Ford automobiles his entire life till he died at age 93. Well, actually, he wasn't driving at 93, but the person who was driving him was driving a Ford automobile. And to date, he's given away 1,900 Ford automobiles as awards to operators who have achieved certain sales goals. So Truett was extremely loyal to that following. He never forgot them. And probably what Truett is most known for is his generosity. And so that core value became part of who we are at Chick-fil-A, and it's very much embedded into our DNA as Chick-fil-A staff members and as operators. And even some of the experiences that you talk about having right here with Rob Taylor's Chick-fil-A that's just outside your south gate come from that spirit of generosity. You know, it started way back. Truett had an interesting background growing up. He came out of the Depression. His mother ran a boarding house. They lived in the first Atlanta housing project. And so he had opportunities when he opened his business. He and his brother pooled all of their resources to open their restaurant. And as Truett became successful, he wanted to give that same opportunity to other people. People who had a heart for service and had an entrepreneurial spirit, but didn't necessarily have the financial ability to open their own business. So he gave him the financial ability, and he expected the sweat equity in return. And it turned out to be a great arrangement, but it was a very generous arrangement on his part. The other thing that Truett did many things. Somebody mentioned today that they knew one of the young men that had grown up in one of Truett's foster care homes. Now, when Truett started opening foster care homes, which are in several states and still running, and in Brazil he has one there as well, 13 foster care homes. He didn't open these up at like typical orphanages that you're accustomed to. The decorator that decorated our corporate office decorated those homes. They're beautiful. And Truett had 2 house parents that were committed to those children, and I think almost all of them except one couple have remained all of those years, so they've been very faithful. And hundreds of children became adopted as Truett as their grandfather. And this is another thing I don't share very often publicly, but I thought this was the coolest thing. When Truett passed away in 2014, he made provisions for every one of those children to receive a significant gift as his adopted grandchildren. So I thought that was pretty amazing in his generosity. One of the things that I appreciate most is an opportunity he gives for leaders within Chick-fil-A to serve throughout the world. Now, Chick-fil-A, this is good note-taking for cadets. Leaders serve, and that means 5 things. They see and shape the future. They engage and develop others. They reinvent continuously. They value results and relationships, and they embody the values. So what Truett gave the opportunities, he realized that those were really important principles, and when you break all those down, by the way, there's lots of books written about that by one of Chick-fil-A's authors, Mark Miller, and so I recommend his books to you where you can actually go deep into that concept because I think that some things are very similar to what you all experience here in the service, and it's not that they're that unique, but I like the way Mark tells them. But one of the things that Truett allowed us to do as staff members and as operators is to go in all parts of the world and share the serve model message to help other people that didn't have the resources to learn about leadership, to have the opportunity to do so. And so think about this. We have people literally traveling to places all over the world that will never have a Chick-fil-A sandwich, that Truett never visited. In fact, Truett probably didn't even know these places existed. And yet his generosity to pay for those people to go there and do that, to give them vacation time as corporate staff members so they didn't have to take their vacation time, was incredible. Now, he did that for one reason. Obviously, he was generous. But secondly, he was generous to the people who were associated with him, because what a developmental opportunity to be able to do that. In fact, one of the unique things at Chick-fil-A is that every staff member has their own development budget. It's an average about $1,500 that they can use in any way they want to develop themselves. And he allows operators to do the same thing for them and their teams and run it through the monthly profit and loss statement. So that's a pretty generous thing to do. So core values are essential, established in that, whether it's for you personally or it's for the organization you lead. It determines how work gets done. The next part in developing a compelling culture is to decide what the guiding principles of the organization are. So what's true north for you or for your organization? And at Chick-fil-A, we have a number of these, and I just picked 4 to unpack with you today. I already talked about closed on Sunday, so I won't dwell on that more. That actually, the only thing I didn't mention earlier that had a benefit to Chick-fil-A, because it helped us to attract and retain particularly teenagers. Because parents really liked the fact that they knew that their child would be off for whatever reason on a weekend day, whether it was spend time with family or even catch up on their homework, whatever it was. Parents really liked the idea that they would be off on Sundays. As a matter of fact, if you go through, it reminded me of a way that we look at leaders for our restaurants. When we talk, the last question I ask the leader that I'm interviewing is, why would I want my children to work for you? Because I'm thinking about those parents I just mentioned about closed on Sunday. Because if I wouldn't want my children to work for this person, why would anybody else? That has been a great way to call out those last few people that get selected for those 100 restaurants. Making second mile second nature. So while I don't talk a lot about this, it's well known that Truett founded his business on biblical principles. And so what did that mean for him? Well, it really essentially meant following the golden rule. In fact, in his office, and they still have this, going on a year and a half after his death, a stack of rulers. And when school children come and tour Chick-fil-A and come through his office, he would give them a ruler that has the golden rule on it, to do unto others as you would have them do unto you. And Truett liked to say, do unto others as they, treat others like they want to be treated. And so he had those rulers there. So one of the biblical principles that Chick-fil-A was founded on was this idea of second mile service. And so it comes from a story in the Bible where the Roman soldier has asked the Jewish citizen to carry his pack a mile, and what it's recorded there is that Jesus says, no, if I ask you to carry it 1 mile, if you're asked to carry it 1 mile, carry it 2 miles. And so we developed this whole idea that first mile service at Chick-fil-A was simply getting your order on time and getting it accurate and being decently friendly to you when you come in. But second mile service, that goes far and beyond. That's greeting you by name when you're a regular customer. How many of you get greeted by name in a Chick-fil-A restaurant? And somebody please raise their hand. Trey, you raise your hand if nobody else does. Okay, good. If they know you, some of you might even have the experience, if you eat there often enough, if you're a raving fan, which means you come there really often, then they probably know your order. And for some people, they go ahead and type it in and they have it waiting for you. By the way, if you're not one of those people, I have a great secret for you. Chick-fil-A's just come out with their mobile app. Oh, and it is so great. You can order that and it can be waiting for you at your Chick-fil-A restaurant. But second mile service is knowing your name. Second mile service is bringing your tray to the table. That probably happens sometimes for you. Second Mile Service is taking a big pepper grinder and coming over and asking if you'd like fresh ground pepper on your salad. So the other idea of this Second Mile Service came from, it's where this whole concept of it's my pleasure. Now I love it because I've heard my pleasure, my pleasure, my pleasure while I've been at the Air Force Academy, and you guys probably were there long before Chick-fil-A was. But where this came from is Truett spent some time with the Ritz-Carlton hotel chain back when Horst Schulze owned Ritz-Carlton. And he enjoyed that service of ladies and gentlemen serving ladies and gentlemen. And I want to say in my time here, that's the closest I've felt to my time in studying the Ritz-Carlton was being right here with you. I feel like the people that have helped me here is ladies and gentlemen serving ladies and gentlemen. And so one of the languages that Horst Schulze created, he created a whole special language around this service that he wanted this premium service of the Ritz-Carlton to be. And so one of the things he did was ask his employees, when a guest says thank you, please say, my pleasure. Truett really loved that. He thought, wow, do you ever hear that in a fast food restaurant? And at that time, you never did. When this first started, you never heard it anywhere else. And so Truett came before, and he liked the idea, 16-year-olds working in restaurants, sometimes they'll say, Truett particularly didn't like when somebody said thank you, and they said what? No problem. He couldn't stand that. Now, I grew up in the South, and I was taught to say, you're welcome. I thought that was pretty good, but Truett didn't like that either. He wanted it my pleasure. So about 10 years before we actually started doing this at Chick-fil-A, Truett stood up in front of the entire at one of our annual conventions, thousands of people, he stood up and he asked the operators, he said, explained the whole story of what I just told you, and he said, when a guest says my pleasure, when a guest says thank you, please say my pleasure. Everybody left, they went about their business, and guess what happened? Nobody did it. Well, you have to understand, because Truett was very particular about who he handed the keys to, he didn't have a lot of edicts. In fact, when I came to Chick-fil-A, he only had 3 rules for operators. Don't open on Sunday, don't change the menu, and put the money in the bank. And that was it. So they weren't used to Truett issuing edicts. And at the time, he probably made it sound like a suggestion, but he really intended for it to happen. So the second year, he got up at our annual seminar, and he did the same thing. He stood up there, and he told the same story again. He says, so when a guest says thank you, I would like for your team members to say, it's my pleasure. Went away. And to make a long story short, this went on for 10 years. And so finally, I was there all those years. In fact, we created a video. I wish I had it with me. It's hilarious. Every year of Truett standing up asking for this. So the 10th year he stands up, and I think he may have, and he was not a very demonstrative, emotional person, but I think he may have kind of pounded his hand on the podium, and he said, all right, now listen up. I mean this. When a guest says, thank you, I want your team members to say, my pleasure. Well, Truett's son, Dan Cathy, who's now our CEO, he picked up on that, and he was quite certain that his dad meant business, and so he led the entire chain of making that a practice. But it couldn't just be a practice to say, it's my pleasure. If you showed up to Chick-fil-A and somebody says, it's my pleasure, but they give you kind of a snooty attitude, and they don't really speak to you, and they don't smile, and they don't get your order right, it really didn't feel like it's my pleasure. So along with that came with selecting for an attitude of service, as well as training for an attitude of service, so that the language matched the experience. So this whole idea of second mile really spilled over into the idea of remarkable experiences too. Has anybody in this room been to daddy-daughter date night at Chick-fil-A? I see one. Was that a great experience? That is my very favorite thing. I wish that we'd had daddy-daughter date night at Chick-fil-A when I was a little girl and I could have taken my dad. So what this event is, and it was created by a local operator, and we turned it, we made it corporate and turned it into a program because it was so good. But it started with a local operator offering second mile service. And what he did sometime around Valentine's Day would turn his restaurant into a really fine dining establishment. And so little girls would get dressed up and bring their daddies to Chick-fil-A. And when they arrived, they would receive a flower, and there might be a strolling violinist or an acoustic guitarist. And there might be a horse-drawn carriage in the parking lot for rides, or even a limousine. And on the table, now, some dads have a hard time talking to their daughters, and so there'd even be, along with the printed menu, would be conversation starters to have talks. Just in case you guys didn't know that does not happen with mothers and daughters, only with daddies and daughters. But what a wonderful thing. And so now, I was with an operator last week in Oxford, Mississippi. Now, Oxford, Mississippi is a really small place. It basically is the University of Mississippi. And this operator had 900 people. He had to have 2 nights, and he had to have it away from his restaurant because he has so many people attending his daddy-daughter date night event. Isn't that amazing that a fast food restaurant does something like that? Remarkable experiences. You can go into a Chick-fil-A restaurant, and this is supposed to happen, so if it doesn't, you'll have to email me. But you can ask the operator for a backstage tour. Now, why would we do that? Well, we would want you to know that your salad is fresh prepared. That doesn't come in a bag. That's chopped right there and made to order in the restaurant. And that lemonade you drink, it only has 3 ingredients. This is not a secret. Lemon juice, sugar, and water, and it's fresh squeezed right there in the back. I met a guy, I don't know why anybody would do this, but I'm thankful that he does, slices lemons and hand squeezes 14 cases of lemons a day so that we can have fresh squeezed lemonade in our restaurants. We want you to see that we use Hershey syrup and Oreo cookies and Heinz ketchup and premium ingredients in our food. And so we offer these backstage tours. By the way, if you're ever in Atlanta, we do the same thing in our corporate office, and you can go around and look at people working. It is not nearly as interesting as watching people in the restaurant because that's where all the action is. But those are some of our examples of how we try to make second mile second nature. By the way, any of you ever been in a restaurant at Chick-fil-A and you got caught in the rain? And somebody showed up with an umbrella? That hadn't happened to any of you. Maybe it doesn't rain enough where you are. But so that happens too. People are in the restaurant and it's raining, and next thing you know, a team member is walking you out holding your order and an umbrella over your head. It's pretty amazing stuff for a fast food restaurant. My last example of this second mile of second nature behavior is operators also came up with this thing. You may have seen it on social media. It went viral, the mommy valet. Of course, they had to change that to the parents valet because it's available to moms and dads. But actually can go through the drive-thru, place your order, park, and by the time you unload the baby and the little kids, because this is really hard when you have small children. Some of you don't know anything about that yet. But it's hard to juggle all that, get your order. Well, when you come into the restaurant, a table, the high chair's been pulled up, the placemats are down, and the food is on the way to the table. Who does that in fast food? Second mile, second nature. Family owned and privately held. This is one of my favorite things about Chick-fil-A. If you ask me why you love working at Chick-fil-A, I loved working for the man who could make all the decisions. Because when you can make all the decisions, you do some pretty interesting things. Like the year before Truett died was his very last opportunity for our annual convention. So what does he do? He rents out the entire Royal Caribbean Allure of the Seas cruise ship and takes the entire organization and their spouses completely paid on the Allure of the Seas. Stockholders don't let you do that. Shareholders don't let you do that. Board of directors don't let you do that. So it was pretty, he loved that. That was his party, and that's how he wanted to spend his money, and that's what he wanted to do. So he did. Now, there were some times that working for somebody who owns their own business, things get a little crazy. Off the top of my head, all of a sudden, I can't remember exactly what year it was, but it was 1996, because if I add 50 to 46, that's 96. I can do math too. 1996, Truett was celebrating 50 years in the restaurant business. And so what we did at the organization was open a new restaurant, a new concept, which was called Truett's Grill. By the way, this man stayed with it till he was 92 years old. He opened his last brand new concept when he was 92. It was a Hawaiian-themed restaurant. That was a little different, but it serves chicken. But in 1996, when we were celebrating 50 years in the Dwarf House, you remember me telling you about him growing up in the boarding house? Well, one of the reasons Chick-fil-A serves breast of chicken is because Truett never got the breast. He was lucky to get a leg or a thigh, but oftentimes, you know what he got? Chicken feet. Now, I know that sounds really gross, and those toenails are really chewy, too. But fried chicken feet was what sometimes he ended up with. So on this anniversary of being in business for 50 years, he got the idea that he wanted to serve fried chicken feet in this restaurant. This is the honest to goodness truth. And so he would go in our cafe and he would have them fry up these chicken feet, and he would walk around on a platter. Now, can you imagine? He'd hand that platter and go, "Would you like one?" Now, he's the CEO, so what do? You take it and you kind of slip it in your pocket and you keep on moving. But anyway, the only reason that restaurant did not end up with chicken feet on the menu is because the guy who ran supply chain could not source it. And he thought Truett was going to fire him because Truett kept telling him, try harder, try harder, try harder. So we didn't end up with chicken feet. But that's the kind of environment you have when you have a family-owned and privately held business. This last one I think is most important, and it reminds me again of the organization that I'm standing in front of today. And that's treating everybody with honor, dignity, and respect. And it's part of what I loved about Truett and how he demonstrated this. My husband was an air traffic controller, and so he knew a few people that do some of the work that you do. And his favorite was always the Air Force pilots. They treated him with the most honor, dignity, and respect. And but before he did that, he sold men's suits. And so Truett would come in his overalls, and here's this at the time. He may not have been a billionaire at that point, but he was certainly a multimillionaire. And he would come in his overalls, and he'd come into the store, and the other salespeople would ignore him because of the way he was dressed. But my husband, he knew who he was, but he would go over and help Truett. And Truett used to do things like, in fact, I was on a business trip one time, and this was before cell phones. I know that predates a lot of you, but there actually was a time that we didn't have those, and I couldn't get a hold of my husband. I couldn't find him. That was very unusual for me to be out of town, and he wasn't at home. Like, where are you? And so when I finally got a hold of him, he said, well, I've been over at Truett's. Like, Truett Cathy, my boss? He goes, yeah, I was sitting at the kitchen table having a Coke with him. I said, really? He goes, yeah. He said, I sold him some suits, and he just asked me to bring them on over to the house, and so I was just visiting with he and Jeanette, and it's like, I work for him, and I'm not sat at his kitchen table. But that's how Truett was. That's how he treated people, and that's what he demonstrated. And so that's what we hope every guest and every employee experiences at Chick-fil-A, is to be treated with honor, dignity, and respect. And I have some important things I wanted to tell you, and I got way ahead of my notes. So what we want to do is, when we have these guiding principles, we want to identify and commit and continually affirm these guiding principles. So all of this comes back to where we started. Creating a compelling culture is important to the organization because it spills over into every aspect of who we are. And when your culture is strong enough, you can have some remarkable moments. And so I want you to watch a video here.
Let's see. Turn back. Please turn back.
Before was like saying I didn't do it, you know? So.
I just had to share that video with you because it went viral on YouTube, and it really demonstrates, I don't know if you really understood what happened, but actually the Chick-fil-A restaurant, so in many of our restaurants, our employees actually serve the guests at the table. They take the trays. And so they allowed this soldier, and my son reminded me, because Mom, it wasn't an airman, it was a soldier. I was like, well, I didn't have one of an airman, so I had to use a soldier. But I think it gave you the point. And so they allowed him to take the food to his wife and surprise her that he was home. So when you tie all this together and you look back and you've created this, you've decided why you're in business or why you've created this organization or why you're serving or whatever it is, when you determine what your purpose is, and then you've defined this mission that you want to be about. What do you want to accomplish? Something that's bigger than yourself. And you figure out how you're going to do this, the values that are important, that'll be the basis and the foundation. And then you demonstrate these guiding principles that are the true north of your organization or your group that you lead. And you tie all that in, and that's what comes together to create this really compelling culture. So I've talked a lot about Truett Cathy today because that's my story. I spent 30 years with an incredible, legendary leader who was still leading at the very end. The last year he was in the office, so he lived to 93, but he left in 2013 at the age of 92. He became ill, and so he wasn't in the office very much. But the last few months before he died, he would call me over to talk about something. And when we would finish, in the course of the conversation before I would leave, he would shake his finger at me. It was a really wrinkled little finger. I still remember that. He'd shake his finger and he'd say, "Dee Ann, don't forget, people decisions are the most important decisions we make." And the first time he did it, I was thinking, well, of course, Truett, you've been telling me that for 29 years. Of course, I didn't say that, but I'm thinking that. Sometimes he even fell asleep in the middle of that because he was 92. But the amazing thing about Truett is he'd wake back up and finish right where he started. So the next month I went over and he did the same thing. We talked about whatever the current issue was. And he said, "Now, Dee Ann, remember, people decisions are the most important decisions you make." And I'm thinking, okay, he's losing it. He told me that last month. Well, this went on for several months, and I finally realized great leaders repeat what's important, and they say it again and again. And he wanted me to know what was important before he was gone. Now, the funny part about it is that the weekend before Truett died, the week before then, he was very ill, and we knew that the time was imminent. And we came to a Friday afternoon, and he was still with us, and we weren't quite sure what to do. We didn't feel like going home. We just kind of all wanted to be together, and a bunch of us ended up in Truett's office talking about this experience. And as I shared my experience of him telling me that, other people started saying, "Well, he told me this over and over again." But that's what great leaders do. They communicate what's important. And what was important to him was this whole idea of creating this incredible culture about impacting lives that would make a difference for a long, long time, long after he was gone. And so that's my challenge, whatever environment you're in, whether it's, what is that group, the Mighty, that it was on, where's my cadet Washington? It was the Mighty something in his, whatever group you're a part of, the cadets, like, Mighty Mach 1, right, whatever group you're in. Thank you. I just about lost it there. Whatever group you're in, or if you're running an organization or you're leading a unit in the service, this idea of what are you there to do, choose wisely and make an impact. Thank you very much. And so we have an opportunity for some questions, and I think there's some microphones out in the audience, and I would be more than happy to answer some. Okay, either I wasn't that interesting or I told you everything there was possibly you ever want to know about the chicken business.
Good morning, ma'am. Thank you for your great speech. I appreciate it. I'll give you a question here.
Thank you.
I'm a retired Air Force, but now a DoD contractor, just have to work for a living now. And I manage a bombing range without getting into technical details and have 850 employees. And unfortunately, the way the government does their contracts every 5, 10 years, they start over. And in this case, 2 years ago, I've taken over a new organization. Average employee has been on that range for 20 to 25 years, doing it their way, right? So now, so my question to you is, how do you impact change? How do you change their culture when they've been doing it for 25 years and not necessarily the right way?
Yeah. That's a great question. It's a hard one because you've had experiences I haven't had, but I will tell you a few experiences that I've had in this short term. And think about restaurant operators that have their team members for a short period of time. First of all, let me tell you personally again, thank you for your service. Restaurant operators are a better example of this than anything we do at the corporate office. Most of their team members, I like to say, they're on their way to something else, and much like the NCAA commercial, they're going to go pro at something else. So they're just passing through. And what our restaurant operators have done has been determined. They know that people come and they either stay or go based on the leader. It's all about the leader. And so, in fact, at my 12:15 session, I'm going to be talking about these very principles that they use to keep this talent and attract it longer than necessary, or to make or longer than usual, or to make an impact on them during that time. But it is all about that individual leader. And so their whole idea is they know that they only have these people for a short period of time, but they're altruistic enough to say, I want to make an impact. And so I want to teach them the skills that they need to be successful in life. I want them to look back and, I was a great leader that helped them get where they want to go, and I want to help the world in general by sending out more skilled people. And so the mindset changes a lot because it's of this temporary thing. It's funny, I'm getting right into what I'm going to talk about at 12:15, but one of the things that I have found out as I get new team members, and I recently had a whole new group of people and had that experience where I had to switch, and figuring out, I'll talk about this later, but figuring out fostering people's dreams. What is their dream? What do they want to accomplish? And one of my team members simply wanted to go to this specific restaurant in Atlanta. And this is a millennial, so I really have to work to keep her. She's brilliant. She's an engineer graduate from Georgia Tech, and I really want to keep this millennial. So I have to figure out what's important to her. She's a foodie, and she wanted to eat at this restaurant. She couldn't afford to eat there. And so her birthday came along, and I really didn't think much about it, but I thought, oh, Dawn likes that restaurant, Marcel, in Atlanta, and I'm going to get her a gift card. Well, I got her the gift card, and it was what she said to me, and I don't mean to be self-affirming in this, but it actually made me stop and think. She said, it wasn't that you gave me a gift card to this nice place. It was that you listened to me to know what was important to me. And so, again, I'm going to unpack that a little bit later on, but getting into this whole idea of what's important to them, and that's how you change culture, is figure out what's important to them. If they want to be a public speaker, well, what access, what resources do I have? I do a lot of speaking. Who can I connect them with so that they have an opportunity to do those things? If they want to go on a mission trip, what can I do? Well, I could help support that as their leader. What could I do to help them? So there's just a whole list of things, but that's the thing that I think changes a culture, is when you care about what they care about and you help make that happen, then they're interested in helping you get what you want.
I agree. Thank you.
Thank you.
Bill Eckert from the community. I appreciate what you just said about fostering dreams and teaching skills. A slightly harder question. Could you talk about minimum wage?
I should have been better prepared for that. Actually, not very much, because all of our restaurants are franchised, and so all of our franchisees set their wage rates. And I can tell you, some of the things they do beyond the wage rate, and it's just a difficult situation. Especially when all of our franchisees are small business owners, basically. And you look at big organizations that have company-owned restaurants, that's one thing, but every one of those individuals is a small business owner. So that's a big challenge for them as we consider that. But I think there are other important issues besides minimum wage. I think it's the conditions in which people work and the environment in which they work and how they're treated by their leader. I think it's their access to health care. their access to general things that help their well-being. So at Chick-fil-A, for instance, our team members have access to health care. They have access to employment assistance programs that help them with emotional or even physical issues that they need help with. So we try to create an environment that's one of camaraderie. It's a great place to come to work. So it's more than a paycheck, but the answer to your question is that's really dependent on our independent franchisees, and they have to make that call. Yes, sir.
Good morning, ma'am. My name is Cadet 4th Class Zachary Martinez. I'm from Cadet Squadron 40. First of all, thank you for coming out here and speaking to us. I know we all really appreciate it. One of the things that I've noticed that us, especially at the Air Force Academy, one of the issues we deal with is that a lot of these grand ideas that we have, like the core values, the principles, Air Force vision, these things are really hard to take action on and to actually implement in our everyday lives, especially now that we're at a very young age and some of us are kind of stubborn. So within your organization, how would you say that you convince or to get these younger individuals who work at your restaurants to go about actually accepting these beliefs and buying into the concept of saying it's my pleasure and actually believing it?
Well, thank you, Cadet, again for your service. I appreciate it very much and your question. Our restaurant operators are the real heroes of that whole story, and they all do it differently. So I'm going to tell you a little bit about them, and then I'll come back to what we've done, interestingly, about changing our corporate culture at Chick-fil-A. I'll come back to that because that might help you some too. But with our hourly employees, our operators are just, they're amazing in, back to this, figuring out what's important to people. And so they do things. So one of the operators that I know, he hit a certain sales goal this year, and he bought his whole leadership team Apple Watches. Now, I know that that's not always, giving gifts is not always the possible thing to do, but it was just this whole idea that he shared his success, whatever it was. And so, it might be something much less than that, but he had achieved something, and he did that for his leadership team. And it wasn't that he hit that big of a sales. It was a personal sacrifice, but they had worked so hard to help him achieve that in his business. Another operator just took his leadership team on he's in Albany, Georgia, and again, relatively to a Truett Cathy, the means are not as much, but he took his leadership team on the Disney cruise to reward them. And he personally has given away, while Chick-fil-A offers a scholarship, it's not enough to really do much more than buy books. And so he's given away over $300,000 in tuition assistance on his own right. Another operator had his daughter was at the home office, and Truett remarked that she had a beautiful smile, and that smile would take her places and to be to her advantage. And he appreciated that so much that he decided for his team members, he wanted to make sure that they had beautiful smiles too, so he offers orthodontics care. And not only does he pay for the orthodontic care, but his wife will take his team members that do not have transportation. He will take them there. She will take them there to get their help. So investing at that level and not just being in it for somebody's their own self is really important. And I think that appeals to this younger group. That person cares about me. The thing I want to tell you about the home office, so we had to change our culture with the entrance of millennials, and this won't resonate because you guys are still, of course, in ties, and I appreciate that, and very formal, but our culture was very formal. I would be wearing a blue business suit normally and those things, but with the advent of the millennials and what we call Chapter 2 culture at Chick-fil-A, I described all of Chapter 1 to you. Well, we're living into Chapter 2. We had to go to the casual dress. The IT people just didn't want to work with ties anymore. And some of you could understand that if you, some of you will go into that career, and after you've worn a tie all these years and you serve in the service, you're tired of that and you don't want to go to work and do that every day. So we changed our dress code. We've changed our office space. We used to have very traditional, offices that reflected the job that you had, and they were very formally decorated, and now we have free address. In fact, if I had my stuff out with you, I could show you my office because it goes everywhere I go. And we work wherever we find a spot, and we just plug in our, we don't have any paper. We're paperless for the most part, and just plug in our laptop wherever we are. And The millennials love it, and the rest of us are adjusting. But we recognize what the future is, both for those who work with us and our guests. And they have different expectations as well. Not doing an advertisement for Chick-fil-A, but our newest product that came out just in the last couple of weeks was the superfood side salad, which is kale and broccolini, and it's really healthy for you. And that was one of those, we realized that we're expected to have a healthy and sustainable menu for this next generation. So that's the way we've approached some of that, and I don't know if that answers your question fully, but I hope that's helpful.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Ma'am, Cadet Third Class Emlyn Evans, Cadet Squadron 36. I'm afraid my classmate asked essentially the same question I was going to.
Oh.
So I just want to say thank you for coming to speak to us and tell you that we really appreciate it.
Thank you so much, and thank you for your service.
Great. Good morning, ma'am. I'm Cadet Third Class Chloe Rose from Cadet Squadron 30. So I wanted to talk about how you discussed how Truett had inspired a lot of innovation, and he led to a lot of the success that your business has today. I was just thinking, without him, how are you guys planning to carry on his legacy and continue this innovation and inspiration in your business?
Great question, and I'm really excited because Dan Cathy, Truett's son, our CEO, Truett did an outstanding job of passing down the important things. And so what I shared with you today was the most foundational parts of our business, the things that don't really change. But there are things like I was just describing to the cadet a moment ago that have to change. Dan's actually more committed to his dad in innovation, so we call it, do we fire a rifle or a cannonball? And so Dan is, we used to wait at Chick-fil-A till we had a cannonball and everything was in place and we knew. And Dan's much more about firing a rifle now. It's like, go ahead, take some shots. If they don't work, we'll do something different. One of the things that I loved was before Truett, in case you saw this viral on the internet, on social media, Truett and his children years ago, the children made a covenant to Truett that after his death that they would not sell the company and they would never open on Sunday. So when you read that on social media, it's not true. They literally wrote it down and presented it to the entire company. Now, the third generation is now in the company, and they seem very committed to the same principles. And, Truett's oldest grandson I know well, and he says he wants to see a 6th, 7th, or 8th generation company. That's a lot to aspire to, and if anybody could do it, the Cathys can. But as far as the second generation, so that's the foundation. But Dan is leading the way. I'll tell you about a visit I made to a restaurant last week. That I was sharing with my escorts last night. I went to our highest volume restaurant, which is in Houston, Texas, this year. It's been in different places. At one time, it was right here in Colorado Springs. Y'all do eat a lot of chicken, and we appreciate that. But this restaurant did, I think I said 9.6 last night, it was 9.4, but $9.4 million this year in one single restaurant. Now, our previous had been just over $7 million, so he didn't just crush the record. I mean, he didn't just break the record. I mean, he crushed this record. And so I went to understand how he did that last week. And it wasn't like he was more dynamic of a leader than most of our operators. I couldn't figure this out. It was all in the systems. It was in the innovation. And so he had figured out some really simple things, but he reconfigured the kitchen. And when you do $9.4 million, you can get the facilities part of the corporate office to change for you. But he realized that it was taking so much time the way the kitchen was configured. So he reconfigured the kitchen so they could move faster. And my favorite thing that he did is, so if you're in the drive-thru, if you've ever looked in a Chick-fil-A drive-thru, there's a bunch of people in there. They're doing all kinds of things. They're running cash register, they're running to get orders, they're doing drinks. And when they need ice or they need cups or whatever, somebody has to run to the back and get them. Well, that takes time, obviously, away from the guest, and he's running 236 cars through at one time. And so he devised this system with a doorbell. The doorbell rings, there's a digital sign in the back, somebody plugs it in up front, it comes up with a code and tells them drive-thru needs ice, and there's somebody in the back that's making salads or something. They stop, they take the ice to the front so that they don't leave the drive-thru where 60 to 70% of our business is. So the innovation is coming from our operators. We have an innovation lab. We have an innovation series So we bring in operators from all over the country to serve on an operator innovation council to speak into all of the things that we need to do to innovate. And then we also have an innovation speaker series where anybody can come and enjoy that, but we bring in people who are leading the way in innovation in businesses across our country. So Dan's, like I said, he's even more focused on that as well. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am.
We have time for one more question, ladies and gentlemen.
First of all, I'd like to start off by saying thank you very much for sharing a lot of what makes your company successful. I've worked in the food industry and the fast food industry for a number of years, and one of the most difficult things that I've found is contending against the negativity against the trades. Often you're looked at as, oh, well, you're there because you're uneducated, you're there because you can't get anything better. What are some of the things that you, or that we could implement as a society that would help re-educate people that the trades are a service? We're there to serve. We enjoy serving. We want to take care of those people. It's not because I'm less than.
Yeah.
How do we change that, by your opinion?
Wow, that's a really great question. And we've really tried to do that at Chick-fil-A. You know, a restaurant operator at Chick-fil-A is not there because they can't do anything else. Obviously, if we can attract some great retiring Air Force officers, they have a lot of leadership capability and have been able to do that. But the men and women that we attract into that leadership role, they attract different people as well. But you know, one of the things that's happening in the education system is people aren't going, they've learned that college isn't, and this is a terrible thing to say at the Air Force Academy, we need people to serve, but colleges are struggling because A, it's become so unaffordable for so many, and then B, people aren't getting the jobs when they get out. So this whole idea of going into the trades is far more popular. I was in Oxford, Mississippi, I mentioned that earlier, and some business people in that area, one of the things that they were doing is they were actually, so this particular, it's the largest company in Oxford, and they need a lot of coders for programming, and they don't have enough, and people don't want the job. And so they're actually going into the Mississippi Delta, where people don't have jobs, and finding people who have the aptitude but no opportunity, and putting them into a program where they learn to do this, and they go to school to do this, and they're coming out making $60,000 or $70,000 a year. To do this. So I think that entrepreneurial mindset of going in and figuring out how to solve these social problems, that will help us with that. But I think that the primary thing is back to this whole idea of leadership and being selective, and that it's not it's not because I can't do anything else, but I'm really here to serve others and demonstrating that service.
Thank you very much. I appreciate it.
Thank you.